Welcome to Life List, a birding podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Life List, a birding podcast. Welcome, welcome. Cheers to George, who's not here today. I am Molly Brown. I'm here with my co-host, Alvaro Jaramillo. Good morning, Alvaro.
Hello. Hello.
Chiming in from the same time zone for the moment before you zip off.
Right, to Thailand. So.
Thailand, yeah. Yeah, we're recording this early April. So I have a couple guests to introduce here, and I'm pretty excited to be in good company because I'm with a bunch of authors of all sorts of things. We're going to touch on the work that y'all do throughout this podcast. But Bryony Angell and Winfei Tong, welcome to Life List.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Yeah. Happy to have you here. It's a morning recording for us, and we were just chatting about birding stuff. And Winfei, you were just saying that you've been on a really great trip. So I'm glad we've saved some of that. Please tell us about it.
So I'm very lucky. The day job I have is to work for the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And sometimes we get to go with lab members, donors, to exciting places. So we were just talking about another trip I didn't go on to Uganda, where I was getting photographs of shoebills, and this bird I've always wanted to see. I've tried to see a shoebill, but didn't. I went with a bunch of fly biologists, and they did not want to wait for a shoebill. But anyway, I got to go to Nebraska to see a real North American spectacle, the largest congregation of cranes anywhere in the world, so sandhill cranes, in the hundreds and thousands. Almost maybe over 500,000. And
wow.
Yeah, we were just talking about how wonderful it is to hear them. One of my favorite memories ever is cross-country skiing with a dog in Montana in April, when this is like the last snow. And then we hear this prehistoric rattling cry, and out of nowhere these two cranes fly in and just land on the snow, and it's so peaceful and beautiful. And this is like taking that sound and magnifying it by 500,000 or 600,000 birds, and the sky, the air around you just fills with the sound. So that was really something to see. And if you get closer to them, they start doing their little dances, and they're both graceful and ungainly and comical at the same time. So that's really something to watch. I
knew there was a huge congregation of sandhills there, but I didn't realize it was so big because I've never been there. So it's that's
Same.
Amazing. That's a lot of cranes.
Yeah, they come to a specific part of the Platte River in Nebraska on their migration from south to north. And we did also see about 5 whooping cranes.
Oh, wow.
Interspersed in the mix. I guess they were a bit confused or lost or something to be flying with the sandhills and not with other whooping cranes. But, that's a conservation success story coupled with there's still a few birds that maybe haven't quite found their own tribe yet, or their own identity yet. And then the other thing that was so cool that we got to see was the other spectacle was greater prairie chickens doing their little courtship dances. And yeah, we can totally get into that. That's absolutely hysterical and riveting for hours.
When we talk about pair bonding, that's a good one.
Exactly. Compare and contrast the cranes and the ospreys that Bryony wrote about, and the prairie chicken way of having relationships.
Avoid a prairie chicken unless you're just in for a good time.
Yeah. Let's say dice no cumple. all show and no follow through.
I mean, not so bad if you're a rock star male, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
That's funny.
Well, this is going to be a podcast of relationship advice, everybody.
I feel like
Let us
we're
know
one
if
of those.
you take our advice.
or midday shows on TV that people used to watch, it's like relationship
Holy cow.
advice by, so and so. And then they'd have people like saying, well, this is what you should do. This is what you should do. But today we're going to do like, what do the birds tell us to do? Right? That's the story, right, Bryony?
Yep, exactly. Yes.
That's awesome.
We should sort of step back and have our guests kind of just say a little bit more about themselves, right? Like just who they are, what they do, what they've published recently.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm Bryony Angell, and I'm a contributor to various birding media. I write about birding culture, so I write about the people who look at the birds, moreover, the birds themselves. And the story we're talking about today is one that I published in November, December of Birdwatchers Digest, called "The Migratory Suitor," and it is just one example of the just kind of the lighter approach to what birders encounter in their lives, because birding is very much something that you don't turn off once you become one. It's something that it really inhabits your person, and so I incorporate birding into all aspects of my life, including an opportunity to re-enter dating when I got a divorce. And so that's what this story is about, and how I look to bird behavior as a way to take a different, use a different lens in
Yeah.
dating in middle age. So it was fascinating to. And this is an intro then to Wen Fei, because I was inspired by her book Bird Love to research and write this story of my experience. Her book is very accessible, natural history book and photo book about bird behavior, family behavior in particular, and a large portion of her book is about the bird pair bonding from courtship to mating to child rearing. I mean, pair bonding involves a lot of pieces of a huge puzzle. So yeah. Anyway, that's me.
Mhm.
Awesome.
Thank you. And I'm Wen Fei Tong. And like Bryony, I've had birds and love for birds and the natural world in my life pretty much, but maybe not the bird bit, but the natural world ever since I can remember growing up. And I used to try to ID dog breeds or African animals on the TV screen when I was a child growing up in Singapore, in a very urban environment, until I discovered birds. And then, I was really good to
That's
go
so cool.
because you can see wonderful birds almost anywhere. And I recently wrote a piece for a journal about how birds offer this wonderful extra dimension of appreciating the world, especially the natural world, wherever we are. And it's this wonderful connection to the natural world. And it sometimes feels like I'm speaking a secret language, or I'm part of a secret club when I, like Bryony said, don't ever turn off the bird part of the brain. So every time I hear a bird, it tells me where I am in the world. And every time I see one, it's doing something interesting that I love to watch. And just to a small point on the books or the writing I do, there is a lot of an attempt to identify with other species, or to put myself in, or to use science and our understanding of a deep history of shared evolution to see try to understand why the animals are doing what they're doing. And I apply that same lens to human behavior. So it's a very equal opportunity. Let's just understand where organisms are coming from and why they're doing what they're doing, rather than trying to draw moral lessons from in either direction. There's no morality involved in this.
Yeah, that's a good
Just
distinction
wanted
to
to
make.
make that clear.
Yeah, that we're not moralizing. We're taking examples that other organisms display, And it's certainly for the story piece. I don't make judgments other than on individuals in the essay itself, which you will see if you read it. There's some humor in there.
Right.
Dating is a fraught place, but yes, to Wenfei's point, there's not. It's using examples from nature, specifically avian behavior, and comparing it to how humans interact. Um, just like it's science. It's not
Right.
opinion or advice.
Right.
It's yeah.
You're right. You make your own dating advice conclusions from this podcast, actually.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
just here's some diverse examples
Yeah.
that are
Yeah.
very entertaining.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, I was thinking that it's such a like when you so you sort of leave your scientist mind behind and you start to sort of thinking about people and birds, and you if you're just thinking about stereotypes of like what would a average woman, what bird would they pick to be in a relationship, and what would the average man pick to be in a bird relationship? And I bet you'd get really different stories. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of guys that want to be the prairie chicken, right? Which
mean-
doesn't really help in terms of pair bonding, but it does it whatever. You meet a lot of females if you're a good.
I think it's a really tough thing for the man to pick, though, because, like I said, unless you're guaranteed to be the heartthrob, the guy who
Right.
has the most attention, you shouldn't be a prairie chicken. You'll end up with nothing but
Yeah.
mooning around with a bachelor group.
Yeah, but on the other hand, that's almost like actual real human behavior because the guys think they're out in the prairie chicken, but they're in fact the satellites around the edge.
You know, my favorite chapter in the book, Bird Love, and what I'm imbuing my son with non-stop is the birds that are what biologists call role reversed. So where the females tend to be larger, dominant, more showy, they often compete for males. And the main contribution the female makes is an egg for the males to take care of. And they'll go around and lay eggs in the nests of various males that the males have constructed. And the males do all the incubation and all the chick rearing. I love those birds. So jacanas, phalaropes. Spotted sandpipers, interestingly.
Oh, wow. I just read that the Wilson snipe, they share responsibilities, and when the young are fledged, the males depart with the older group, and the females depart with the younger offspring. And I just thought that was fascinating. It's like
Wow.
well, in my experience, it's like co-parenting. Like
Right.
my younger daughter lives with me most of the time, and my older son lives with his dad most of the time. So it's like, oh my God, we're Wilson Snipes.
There's a funny term for it. Biologists call it brood division. There are quite a few species that separate out the kids. I think a lot of
on a
grebes
trend,
and
that's interesting.
Yeah,
I'm thinking through this now. I don't know. Is it an actual trend that in species where the female is the showier, more visually selective one? This is discounting infrared vision, that how birds are seeing each other in ways that we don't comprehend. So, sorry, ultraviolet.
Ultraviolet. It's not really, actually. People in all sorts of areas of bird behavior are making sure that they record what the bird sees from a bird's eye view. So, if I used to do research on brood parasites, birds that lay the eggs in the nests of someone else.
Oh, yeah.
So that the host, the sucker, the foster parent has to take care of someone else's offspring. And in species like the common cuckoo of Europe and Asia, or the cuckoo finch that I was studying in sub-Saharan Africa, that evolutionary relationship between the brood parasite and the host species has been going on for long enough that if the parasite's egg doesn't look a lot like a good mimic, a good fake, it will get tossed out by the host. So there's strong selection by the hosts to make the parasites produce very good mimetic eggs, good forgeries. And when we study that, we don't just look at it from a human's eye perspective. We take photographs with a UV filter so that we can reconstruct what the birds are seeing to see if the match is really good from a bird's eye perspective.
Do you find that is...
Yes.
I just have so many questions.
In short, yes. I mean,
okay, great.
There's selection, yeah. And so with all the amazing displays like birds of paradise or anything with display feathers or skin, people would try to measure it now with UV as well.
That the brood parasites are what I studied back in the day, and it was actually egg mimicry that I was studying in Argentina, but I never got too far into it with cowbirds, bay wings and screaming cowbirds and stuff. But I tried to make fake eggs. And now it seems so stupid because I wasn't even thinking of, at that time, UV light or anything. And you're just trying to make them look alike. And that never worked. So there's a lot of failures in my cowbird work, but it was good times. I learned a lot.
That surely prove a lot of points. So.
It's like, I'm not fit for, to actually do a lot of research is what I realized. I got to do more bird touring.
It's so hard. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. It's super hard. And I had, anyways, I don't want to talk about my stuff, but another time.
And this is the time too. Well, okay. So my original question a few back, my mind's going in so many directions. I'm glad I had coffee before we started this. But in species where the females are the more visually colorful ones, are they typically species where the male is then raising the chicks? I guess that is somewhat consistent, right?
Yes. And some of my favorite examples, I mean, so the sort of dispassionate evolutionary biology way of looking at all this pair bonding and who does the parenting and who you select for a mate is basically treating the other individual that you're going to reproduce with as a reproductive investment. So you think about it like you're an investment banker or something, or you have your own assets, and you basically need to trust this co-investor to either, in the case of something like prairie chickens, have good genes to pass on to the offspring, because that's all the male is doing, as opposed to someone who's also going to be a good steward, a good co-steward, or in the case of the role reverse individuals, the male is doing all the care, so he better be very good at that. So sometimes he would signal it by having a nest that looks good or something like that. But it's something that is a signal. So back to Bryony's example with birds that are long-term pair bonded, they will often give each other tokens of their something to signal that the bond is still going on, and it's often a reiteration of the pair bond in the way people, have their vows sit again or go for dates, even though they've been together for a long time. You'll see cranes or albatross go through these very synchronized motions of dancing every time they see each other again. And the longer they've been together, the better they get at it sometimes.
Okay.
Oh,
So
sorry,
Bryony.
but back to the... I didn't answer your question properly. Back to the role reverse species. It often happens that in species where the offspring, the chicks, they're quite what biologists call precocial, as opposed to altricial. So altricial is super helpless. Like a lot of the songbird chicks that we see, the robin-type chicks that are hatched are blind, with no feathers, pink skin. They can barely thermoregulate. That kind of bird often needs two parents to take care of them. But if one parent is enough, that's often when the chicks are somewhat fluffy and they have open eyes and they can start foraging for themselves almost immediately. So things like prairie chickens, the male is never there, right? The female is a single parent from the start. And with a lot of shorebirds, There's some plover populations in particular species, like I think Kentish plovers are one of the species, where it depends on the population that they're in. If males are more common, then it's easier for females to find a new partner than for males to find a new partner, because whichever sex is rarer, this is like game theory, whichever sex is rarer is going to be the sex that's in more demand. And so it's easy for the females in those cases to find a new mate. So they tend to abscond first and leave the male, because you only need one parent to take care of these chicks. In another population of the same species where the males are rarer, you'll see the reverse, that the males tend to abscond first and leave the females to take care of the chicks.
Wow.
The one thing I was like thinking about is, when, we were talking earlier about language and using anthropomorphism and that word itself, but I was like just thinking about the words we use, and I don't know if there's a solution to this one, but when we talk about sex role reversed birds or anything, there's kind of an like underlying, there's a norm, and this is the reversed, right?
That's
but
right.
we're just thinking it's the common versus the less common, rather than there's a way to do it and a way that's kind of like wrong to do it, right? There's an aspect of sex role reversal when people talk about it that implies it's unusual and weird and off.
Yeah.
When in fact
Atypical.
it's as natural. It's as natural as any other type of behavior that birds do. And I've often wondered, how do we make language sometimes in biology not have these implications? But it's impossible. We're humans.
I
There's
think it's
always
impossible.
implications.
The main thing that phrase is telling us is it came up at a time when most biologists were males.
Right. Yeah.
Because there's plenty of organisms in the world where females are typically the dominant individuals and males are typically doing the childcare. Including a lot of fish. We talk about this a lot in my household.
Yeah, we forget about fish.
I bet we all have pretty interesting household conversations. Okay, Bryony, I wanted to ask you this like chicken or egg situation. Did you read this book before you started like consciously applying these parallels to your dating life, or which inspired which here?
Yeah, it was Wednesday's book first. So I saw her book reviewed in a birding magazine. It might have been birding, the ABA's birding magazine. They do a lot of reviews, and I thought, oh that sounds really. I want to read that book. I want to get my hands on it. That looks very appealing to me. And at the time, I was still in my marriage, and um, and I'm not quite remembering the sequence of events, but I believe I purchased the book, and I just didn't get around to reading it until I left my marriage, and then I immediately thought of it um, and started reading it with both curiosity towards what I was experiencing and and ending a pair bond, and then considering my curiosity to form a new pair bond. Here I am I'm speaking so detached about wanting to find a new guy. But the book just gave me that detachment, because it was a rough time. It's I don't, if anyone is any listener, I mean, it doesn't matter if it was a marriage or just a partnership. When they end, it's a minor trauma, and then picking up and starting over, reestablishing new bonds with someone else. It takes a different set of energy outputs, and I just thought I need something that is completely out of my head, and I have this lovely book. I've been wanting to read it. I've owned it for several years and haven't cracked it open yet, other than to look at the pictures. And now I'm going to dedicate. I'm going to dedicate to reading it cover to cover, and it's gonna comfort me. And it did. The book totally delivered on everything that I expected. I don't know that I'm her ideal reader in terms of what I was going through when I read it, but there you go, Wenfei. There's some data points for you. And
absolutely my ideal reader.
Yes. Well, just the piece of it, just the with so many ways to apply what I was learning from this book to my own life as a human. So to answer your question, Molly, the book came before this initiative to write about my experience reentering dating as a middle-aged divorcee. Yeah, it was completely my now I should back up and say I didn't know Wenfei at the time. I just knew her book. And I proceeded to write the story, research the story over about 18 months. And it wasn't until I had a draft of the story that I thought, I need to talk to Wenfei. There's some questions I still have that I think would contribute to this story.
Mhm.
And I mean, if she's willing to chat with me, that would really enhance the information I'm imparting in this personal essay, for the reader, as well as, I mean, I didn't anticipate how much it would influence the story itself, and
Mhm.
how when one of the things that Wenfei, one of the questions she answered, just it totally made the story. And I couldn't have written the story without her. So, I mean, literally could not have written the story without her
Yeah.
based on the book and what it prompted. But even more so was her direct influence when we did finally talk. And we've been talking ever since.
I was going to
Now
say,
we're
I think
friends.
I feel like meeting Bryony is the best thing that happened out of the book.
That's cool.
Oh,
That's cool.
Just wonderful, and all the inspiration and fun that we've had talking about books and birds ever since, and writing. It's rare to find another person that you can connect with, both on the
Yeah.
writing front as well as the language front, as well as the natural world, through the
Ye-
natural world.
When I first before I'd read and with sort of when this idea sort of came up of talking about this, I was thinking like, oh boy, this is fraught with danger to look at bird behavior and human behavior and make parallels. And then as I thought about it more, there were some things that like were so obvious, and like if anybody's listening to this and going, this is, this humans and birds and nature, they're different things. But I just like pose this question, like imagine if humans had, instead of a 8-day cycle, there was just one time a year where all the females that are reproductive age actually were available to reproduce. Our whole human history would be different, right? Like everything we do would be different from just one single biological tweak. And so if you sort of expand that to like lesser things, we are part of our biology in a sense, and some of it is parallel with birds. So we can kind of understand things in a way that's detached, like you said, that you can kind of like go step back and go, oh, right?
Well, and also that humans, because we're so flexible and adaptable and have all this culture layered on, that makes us very behaviorally diverse across the world and across time. I mean, you could go into long conversations, books worth of a lot of the bedrock of animal behavior and understanding the evolution of different animal behavior mating systems, for instance, is predicated on the distribution of resources in space or time. Those resources could be nest sites, or they could be food, or they could be a combination of both. And that sometimes very often dictates the way in which birds, in this case, or humans, arrange themselves, and how easy it is to guard a single resource. So if we're going to draw the parallels there, it's the difference between an emperor who has tons of grain amassed because that environment allowed you to do that. They also tend to amass a lot of females in a harem, as opposed to a situation where resources are very scarce, very hard to get hold of. And in some mountainous populations, this is the other extreme, you have multiple males sharing paternity and with one woman, and all helping to take care of her offspring that they all have shares in. Because it needs quite a lot of adults to go provision those human offspring till they grow up. And human life history is a very investment heavy, intensive way of raising offspring.
I think, I read some statistic way back, and who knows if it wasn't in a scientific paper, it was probably like People magazine or something, but that most divorce, like a lot of divorce in humans is actually over money, right? Like essentially resources. There's just not enough money to go around or whatever. And you think, well, that makes complete sense. And it is exactly like a bird suddenly going, I got to find another nest here because this one is not going to be the one that's going to get me through and raise these chicks, right? I mean, it's
So to get back
and it makes
to that,
it funny too. Like really awful things are funny if you kind of put it through a bird perspective,
Yeah.
It's funny that you said that, because I tell the story sometimes where the first time I got Bird Love in print landing on my desk I just moved from Alaska to New York City because of a failed marriage and failed relationship. And I opened the book, and the first thing it falls open to is this photograph of two herring gulls looking very beady-eyed and sort of not, herring gulls tend to look a bit stern, looking in opposite directions. And the caption said something like, in herring gulls, divorce is often preceded by a failed nesting attempt. And that made me laugh so much. It was great. I thought, this is just right.
That's an example of pathos there. It's like, man. Yeah. Yeah.
This is like a whole different tangent that we don't need to go down, but I was just listening to a podcast about the evolution of the middle class and how the concept of like saving money is not all that old in human history, that, it was just a few hundred years ago that like that wasn't how we stockpiled provisions, and just all these different things that come out of that too. And in thinking about, like we can go back pretty quickly in our evolutionary history as humans and get down to those simpler resource management techniques that are very recently changed for us.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Molly, I'd love to know what that podcast is. The evolution of
stuff you should know. It's a good
Okay.
podcast.
Stuff you should know.
Yeah. Just the concept of resource hoarding is, specifically money versus food or livestock or, that sort of thing is relatively new. That's fascinating.
But, again, there's fun parallels, because one of my other favorite stories to tell is birds where there's cooperative breeding. So there's a group of non-reproductive individuals that stay behind or that enter the group and help care for the offspring of the dominant pair of individuals that are reproductive. And sometimes this is explained by what I the parallel I draw is with the real estate markets in places like New York City or San Francisco, or a lot of the middle class North America nowadays, where the younger generation just can't afford to set up home on their own. There's no available real estate left. So you have to stay behind and hang out as an adult, as a fully self-sufficient adult with your parents or with an older family member, because there's no territory available.
Yeah, just like
that you can
boomerang birds.
afford as a young couple.
Yeah.
And so, this is in the animal behavior literature. The hypotheses like pay to stay. You can go to the papers, published academic journals, and find these phrases and these hypotheses.
Yeah.
And in terms of amassing money, I mean, the birds obviously don't have currency and an abstract case of money, but I love acorn woodpeckers because some populations will amass huge oak granaries of acorns, and they drill little holes in the trees, and every hole has its acorn, and you need a big group. It helps to have a big group to defend those granaries.
Right.
And again, with resources, not all acorn woodpecker populations do this. It's only some of them. There are other populations that are not quite so cooperative breeding.
I can't help but especially the Anis, but maybe the Guiracucu more so down south. I think of them as these hippies. They're like a whole I look at a Guiracucu group and I feel like it's this is back in the 60s and the hippies, kind of Marin County.
With the communal.
This is exactly with a communal kind of lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I actually see them that way. It's weird, but it's
me too. And the other thing, I don't want everyone to think that just because the book is called Bird Love and we're talking about courtship and all that it's all like a Hallmark card. So to me, the birds, the communally breeding birds like the Anis or the Guiracucus are amazing for this, because within that cooperative group, you have a ton of infighting and competition and trying to chuck each other's eggs out of the nest, because if you have too many eggs in that communally incubated nest, some of them don't get incubated very well. So the dominant individuals will try to get rid of the subordinate individuals' eggs.
It probably is like a hippie commune.
It really is like a hippie colony in every way. Exactly.
The TV version.
It's not all sweetness and light.
They're not as bucolic as they present.
That's right.
Right.
Exactly.
That's so funny.
They're all infighting behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Well, this is making me think of, I was looking for black-headed ducks in Chile last fall when I was there, and they are ducks that lay eggs in the nest of other waterfowl. And it was cracking me up. I think it's like the Merlin description says that they're often sleeping during the day and they just aren't really active. And I was like, these are so the double income, no kids kind of ducks, just living their lives, not worried about anything at that point.
That's so amazing. Oh, you're making me
idea
wonder
of
how
more
they
recreation space. Yeah, I don't actually know a lot about that whole process, but
no, that's so cool because ducks, one of the other things we were doing on this Nebraska trip I just came back from was looking at a lot of hybrid ducks. And one of the main explanations for why there's so many hybrid ducks is a lot of waterfowl, like grey-lag geese famously, imprint on whoever's raising them. So if you raised a bunch of goslings, they would think they were human, basically, for a bit. And a lot of ducks do a lot of this egg dumping, even if they're not specialist broods parasites like the one you're talking about.
Wow.
A lot of mergansers or eiders or mallards
Redheads
or whatever will
yeah.
stick a couple of eggs in someone else's nest. I guess just to hedge their bets. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so those ducklings will hatch in a group that is not in a family that's not their own species. And I think sometimes they misimprint and then they grow up and, mate with a different species. And that's how you often get hybrids.
Yeah. The black-headed duck is really crazy because it's the only obligate brood parasite that is actually a precocial bird.
It's
and
amazing.
It means that it only needs incubation. That's all it needs. So it actually
Right.
will sometimes stick its eggs in snail kite nests or ibis nests, like mostly
Wow.
coots. But
Whoa.
there's this researcher, Bruce Lyon, who's a friend of mine
Yes.
that studied them, and he just
Oh.
told stories of just they're crazy.
Yeah,
But
Bruce's work is amazing. It's so funny you brought up coots, because when we were talking about the brood division, Bruce Lyon's work on coots crossed my mind, and I thought, oh, too evil to talk about,
oh
too
yeah, that's
awful to
really
talk
evil.
about, but
It's
but
basically
it is
beating
so
up your
cool.
kids.
The idea
Coots
there
are
is
holy cow.
coot chicks. Coot chicks are so colorful. They have these amazing head patterns and things like that. Bruce did some experiments to show that basically that is all to the chicks' attempts to make themselves more appealing to the parents so that they get some attention and some parental care. Otherwise, it's like tough luck. If you cut off those little golden feather tufts and things like that, they have a harder time competing with their siblings for, parental care. And the parents will, there's quite a lot of tough love in coot
Yeah.
family life. It's
And you don't want to
impressive.
be a coot.
No, you do not want to be tousled
Yeah.
by your parent.
That's a
No.
dystopia novel in the making.
Yeah.
Yeah. Coot life.
Oh.
Old coot, we could call it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Coots are, well, I mean, yes, we could do a whole thing about coots. A whole
That'd be
hour.
cool.
We could.
Maybe Bruce should come on here and
Oh,
talk about coots
yes!
one day.
That
But
would be amazing.
So
I
which
wanna-
birds are the best parents?
that's a good. Wow, that's a good question.
I mean, I can
How do you
think of
measure it? Right?
Yeah, I mean, there's
Is
the
it
going to say,
output?
how do you define it?
and also there's the while the female's brooding, there's that the cooperation between the two parents who are raising the young together, or who are fostering the egg. That cooperation, and then once the egg hatches, does that fostering continue from the male, and if so, for how long, and to, then what happens when they fledge, and so there's the whole, I guess, if we were looking at the entire arc of
Yeah.
parenting, what species are by our judging or
I
putting
think
a
of,
value factor on it.
I think some of it, yeah, it's value, because you might look at your own life through, I mean, I remember, well, so as a kid, my parents divorced, and we actually went to live with my dad, which is unusual. So I often think of MERS, the common MERS out at sea with the dad and his, young, like screaming at him. And I think, oh, that was kind of like my life. So I'm not sure it's good. It's a good situation, but I always sort of relate to it. And then you wonder about, like, birds, like you see those Caspian terns where it's like, or elegant terns, way, way beyond the breeding season. The young is still following the adults, and the adults are still like giving it fish, and thinking like, wow, that's a lot of investment on these young, while other birds we've already talked about do nothing, right? They're just like, there you go, you're done,
Right.
black-headed duck.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I always think we would identify the most with the ones that are long-lived and whose children take a long time to grow up and still need to learn a bunch of stuff. So, the cranes or the albatross, or especially the cranes, because they migrate, and we know that the young will follow their parents and learn the route from their parents, and that it takes so long to grow up, and then it takes quite a long time to learn to be a good parent yourself. So the first time you have offspring, it tends to fail.
Yeah, these same pairs you're talking about, like specifically with cranes, the male and the female tend to return to each other every season.
That's right.
As the same pair.
Right.
What we would call monogamy, but that doesn't really exist in nature. There's pair bonding that is consistent every season. And so that's the same. Whereas you don't have parents who pair off differently every year. And and have that same consistent parenting for the duration, both of them. It seems like it's all or nothing with birds.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Or
well, there's also
I'm generalizing.
it's also the case with many species that there's when there is a pair bond, there's often extra pair copulations. What
Mhm.
what biologists call extra
Mhm.
pair copulations. Yeah,
What humans call cheating.
yeah. Right. I wasn't
Yeah.
I wasn't going to go there. I was like, I don't know what term to apply.
Yeah. It it it's sometimes in birds when you do the genetic work, it's almost equal opportunity though. It's not always, but one sex is not necessarily doing all the extra pair
No, you
copulations like
can't.
both. Yeah, you
It
can't,
has
right?
to be
But it's
both because
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
unless there's
because
a
it takes
whole
two.
lot of extra of one sex, which typically there isn't.
Right.
Right. Right.
Yeah. No, my
Yeah.
favorite example there is these superb fairy wrens from Australia, where the males would often display to neighboring females with little flower petals, but they don't do that display to their own long-term pair bonded mate.
Oh,
They
wow.
only do it to
Wow.
the ones they're hoping to have extra pair copulations with. And then the best bit of this is the biologist studying them couldn't figure out when the extra pair copulations are happening. Oh, I should preface this by saying that species is up there for any kind of bird species in terms of the number of offspring in a nest that are not fathered by their mother's social mate, the guy you think should be their father. It's very high. I can't remember what it is, but it's much more than half the chicks. And people were wondering when the females actually make their decision about who to cheat with. And based on some radio tagged females, they found out that just before dawn is when the females kind of creep out of the nest and go to whichever bush they know their suitor is in, and they just get it over and done with really fast, right? And then they're back home. So yeah, that was a complete mystery,
Wow.
and they do it with great secrecy.
Yeah.
Very
It makes me
discreet.
think about like pleasure in bird relationships, right? If it's like the chemistry of those
Oh yes.
going through the brains of these birds, because is the same thing happening, in these birds, or like when white-tailed kites say mate 20, 30 times a day. Is this just because they're really bad at passing on the sperm to the female, or is it because they actually kind of enjoy the act, or is it that the act itself is part of pair bonding? But I would love to know what is actually the chemistry in the brain that's going on. Are they feeling something akin to pleasure through their pair bonding as humans do?
Yeah, I would
Well,
bet
I was
they are,
thinking,
or they wouldn't be doing it.
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
I
I'm
mean,
sure there's
yeah.
some kind of neurochemical reward that has evolved to make them want to do it all the time, which is a separate question from why they do
right.
mate all the time, if that's really to transfer the sperm or just to cement the pair bond or both.
Right.
But there is good evidence, I think, that the hormone that causes pigeons to let down crop milk. So, birds don't produce the same kind of milk that mammals do, but pigeons and doves produce a kind of crop milk for their chicks. The hormone that regulates that letdown is evolutionarily related to oxytocin, I think,
Hmm.
which is what regulates milk letdown in mammals, as well as a bunch of pair bonding, whether
Yeah.
that's
That's
between
pretty neat.
Yeah, it is.
the males and females, and between, when you pat your dog, oxytocin is involved in
Right.
that
Wow.
relationship, that pair bonding
I was
response.
thinking similarly in going back to the crane example and the fact that cranes will display to each other many times, and what is happening in brain chemistry there for something that is just a
Right.
display of what perceived affection and bonding or courtship, and what do they receive any sort of, emotional or neurotypic reward for that?
Yes, I'm sure they do. I mean,
Yeah.
I doubt anyone's ever going to do this on a crane because they're so big and long-lived. But a lot of the experiments on pair bonding and what birds in particular experience would be done on small things like zebra finches and some of the parrots like budgies or lovebirds. And I do know some of the experiments that they're more on the behavior side. They didn't look at the brain chemistry, but it's really clear that they are so pair bonded and that some of these behaviors are to cement that pair bond. So if you split the couple up after pairing them for a while and after they're really fond of each other, they do a lot of calling back and forth into the emptiness, into the silence, because they, you can read into all sorts of emotions into that, but they basically make a lot of the calls.
Yeah.
And they keep it up for a long time.
It's
like they can't let go of that bond.
And then there's some other birds that just have none of that at all. Like they, there's like hummingbirds, or they're just like, all right, next.
Right. You wouldn't catch a greater prairie chicken bothering with any
pining
of this.
away. No pining.
Pining away.
Pining male among the prairie chickens.
But there is also a component of like we are talking about all this amazing diversity that can happen, but within birds there are like I would call it like phylogenetic taxonomic kind of patterns or limits. Like hummingbirds are hummingbirds, and no hummingbird has a pair bond where the male sticks around and does, and helps in the young. And there's hundreds of species of hummingbirds. And you think, why couldn't it have evolved once or twice, or it just didn't? And there is like an aspect of in our broad look at birds and human, there are limits to what does happen and doesn't happen in some creatures. And on the other hand, shorebirds, the shorebird group, everything it seems to happen. That's from ruffs to phalaropes. So it's an interesting thought process too, that it's not like all behaviors are all possible in any creature or any human, right? I mean, or any human group, right? It's just sort of like it's but we're kind of picking and choosing things that we find kind of cool and interesting in the bird world, I guess is what we're doing.
Well, and I guess, in terms of the hummingbirds and the path they went down evolutionarily, there's such specialists at producing those flashy feathers and displays.
Right.
But also it comes down to the resources again, the food. They're so specialized on eating nectar, and flowers are this type of resource that you have to... They're often so territorial about their little flower patch. And I suspect that's got a lot to do with why they have the mating system and therefore the parental care behavior system that they have. Their closest relative are swifts. Relatives are swifts, and swifts are pretty good at biparental care.
Right. That's right. Yeah. No. I'm thinking of the resources and language that we talked about before. I remember there was a paper way back that described hummingbird behavior as prostitution polyandry. I think, and I was like thinking, holy, at the time it seemed, okay, I understand what that means. Basically, if you mate with me, I'll let you have some of these flowers was what was happening. But I was thinking, like, in today's world, we probably would not use that word that has a connotations of various connotations, right? But I was like, it is an interesting thing to the actual behavior is interesting that some hummingbirds do. And it's anyway, there's a lot to learn about in hummingbirds.
Wow. Yeah. Alvaro, you said something that made me immediately jump to the human side, where you were talking about why some birds evolve different mating strategies or pair bonding. For instance, the shorebird group has got more diversity of presentation in terms of, what humans would look at of
Right.
pair bonding and child rearing, and whereas other species don't. And there's this whole conversation going on and on the human side where, men won't go to therapy, men won't change. And
Right.
and so it's like, wow, well, some of them will go to therapy and some of them will change, but how do you find the one that will? If you're a woman looking for a pair, for a mate. And so it's funny to think of therapy as sort of the modern day evolutionary push, this accelerated evolution of behaviors that
Right.
humans have imposed on ourselves through this concept of therapy. I had to throw that in there because what you said made me think of that.
Yeah, I do wonder if our brains do have like we get stuck on behaviors in a way that maybe birds do or do not. But I remember in the conversation about bird playback of songs, I remember that somebody was looking at stress levels in birds, that their stress level does go up when they're like thinking they see another or hear another male. But after the sound is gone, it kind of drops back down to baseline really quickly. But
So
humans
how
don't.
much
We
of the
like,
hamster wheel do
right.
other
Yeah.
species experience, right?
Right.
Of
Exactly.
running
Like it
through.
sort of seems like we're not doing that. We don't kind of go like, oh, that stressful thing wasn't really that big deal and go down to zero. We kind of retain all this stress in a
Yeah.
weird it's not helpful. Let's put it that way. And I wonder if we
Yeah,
develop other behaviors like therapy to kind of allow us to like, okay, I want to be a bird and just go back to base level right away rather than have to go through all these shenanigans
Yeah.
in my brain.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's sort of how I use birding or being in nature. It's one of my ways of stopping that inner chatter about
Yeah.
why someone did something that made me unhappy or said something that made me unhappy, and sort of break that mental cycle and just be present in
Right.
in something. It doesn't even have to be that beautiful, but it takes me out of myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely my intent with the story, and with my
Yeah.
approach with when Facebook was this detachment. I'm going to apply natural history behaviors to my own experience of moving through this world of dating, which is uncertain and it's hard to not take personally, and can be a real emotional roller coaster.
Right.
And if I approach it with this like field work, I can proceed with a grain of salt and
Right.
and take in the information, not to process it as personally. Keep it at arm's length. Not to be
Yeah.
totally cold. I didn't want to be cold either. I was going to be a participant, but with some perspective. And because dating is very fraught. And
Right.
I wanted to have a sense of humor about it, and I wanted to preserve my humanity and not get cynical. And I just found that applying those natural history principles was such a salve. It
Right.
really helped me move through uncertainty, and then now if you read the story, you'll see what happened. But I'm yeah. I guess I'm just to summarize. It's that it was sort of a form of therapy, you could say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm thinking as you're talking, there's another book idea that you could both actually work on this. See, and it's actually
Ooh.
almost like a field guide to the people.
I have long thought of doing this. I like drawing as well.
Right.
And I
Oh,
used to
yes,
think it would be so
Oh.
funny to do a cartoon book of field guides. Specifically, I was thinking to people in airports, because there's
right.
like a type, and you could produce the book to look like a bird field guide with the like different categories of,
Right.
and then you
and
could
I
have the key behaviors and the key plumage characteristics of the people.
I was
like
I
how
was
they,
thinking like you could do it with birds as like your model in a way that you said, here's the cranes, and then a couple of people who actually fit the crane, like what the people that actually are cranes versus the rough
Yeah.
versus the Rhea, with, I see this
Yeah.
male with,
with all the
10
little
kids from
chicks.
from three moms, and,
Right.
and you're thinking like all of this kind of exists in a weird way.
It
And you just
does.
do a
It
little
does.
funny book. It would probably offend a lot of people and make other people laugh, but that's life today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
No, I feel that I do
Yeah.
that every day. I just compare people and other species, not always birds, interchangeably. And the people closest to me have distinct ringtones that are based on the species I associate them with, so that I know who's ringing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I've got to say, this is a podcast that is pretty science driven with a ton of tangents
Oh,
and
good.
a fair bit of BS.
A lot of
But
tangents.
but we talk about a lot, and our most popular episodes are always the titles that have something very science heavy in the text too. But I am always thinking about this, me coming into it as someone who does not have a formal background in biology or anything in the sciences, actually. And I just greatly appreciate hearing from folks who have specialized and spent their lives and careers studying these things, that it is approachable to, that anybody can sit and look at a robin nest and think about these things and draw parallels to their own lives and embrace science from a human-centric point of view and still have valid thoughts and still make, connections that are important and do whatever you want with that for your own life or for birds and all of the above. I think it's great to have those reminders as well. So I think this whole topic ties all of that together in a really fun way.
I'm so glad. Yeah, we covered a lot of science.
We did.
Bryony, is the osprey still around, or did?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Mr. Osprey?
Okay. Yes, Mr. Osprey.
Cool.
Yes, Mr. Osprey is alive and well, and
Okay.
just moved his boat, or his, I don't know,
Right.
he's closer to where I live. So
Little migration. Yeah.
migration,
But, yeah.
ever
Migration.
closer.
I
That's so
didn't
funny.
want to be too nosy, but you did write about it, so
Oh yeah, I know. There's a risk when you document something like that. That
Right.
is it an evergreen story, or is it a story that has a clear ending? And so far,
Right.
this one's evergreen.
Well, we're
Wow.
happy. We're
So
happy.
there's going to
Thank
be,
you.
this can become a column, right? We can have more articles on the topic.
I don't know.
Well, he's living up to his name,
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
It's good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, he
You
is.
you got that one
Brings you-
ID'd correctly.
Right. Brings you
Yes.
fish every so often. So
Yeah, no, well, he did the other gifts. Yeah, he's actually he doesn't eat meat, so
right.
there aren't any fish. But yeah,
Yeah. Cool.
Ospreys get creative with that too.
Yeah.
All sorts of gifts coming in, right?
I
It's
know
true.
they're great birds. They're
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
I've gotten definitely very apt avian choice for this
Right.
individual. Yes.
That's awesome. Well, I feel like you two could run the coolest book club ever. I feel like that's what we just did, which is really fun. It's been a really
That
fun
would be fun.
conversation. And man, there's so much that I wanted to ask you about. So we'll have to pick this conversation up in a future episode, I think.
That would be lovely.
Including a byline, Winfei, in one of your biographies that talks about like sneaking dead birds into a Zambian jail. It sounds like you have some stories to tell.
There's other stories
So,
left in
I
the.
look forward to
So
the next
much.
episode where we dive
Yeah.
into those.
And something we haven't really talked about, and you can cut this if you don't have
yeah.
time in this podcast, but the conversation we were having got to the point where I was thinking one of the areas in animal behavior I'm so glad is really gaining traction is understanding individual personalities within a species. Which, we're
really
starting to
stuff.
have some evidence about that. And not just that, but how different personalities do or don't like to pair together when they form relationships.
That's so fascinating. That's really cool.
So yeah, some of that is really cool.
Yes.
The fact that biologists studied things thinking personality didn't exist is so odd, given that probably most biologists had a pet. But
exactly.
it was just not allowed, I think. You couldn't think that way.
That's
I think that was part of it.
Yeah.
And it would also make it makes it so much more difficult. If you think an animal's a bit like a robot, you can simplify.
There go your sample sizes if they're all different, right? You can't replicate anything.
It would be really fun to just talk about these sorts of like progression of, the quality of biological studies based on diverse perspectives and ways that, more things are becoming accepted to consider. And there's so much. Can't wait.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, first off, Bryony, is it okay if we link this article in our show notes?
Yes. I would love it if you link to it. Yes, thank you.
Definitely. Okay, so Bryony, we'll have this article linked. Do you want to tell folks where they can find more about you, about the articles you write, anything that you want to leave for the audience?
Yeah, my website is my name, bryonyangell.com, and I write about all different kinds of topics, and I speak at events. My latest articles are about bird-friendly chocolate, coffee, and maple syrup. So I veer all over the place in terms of birding culture.
Sweet. Yeah, and Wenpei, same
syrup.
For you. Where can folks? Yeah, so wheat.
I guess my website would be good too. And thanks to Bryony, I'm going to write one on bird-friendly beef, which is another topic close to my heart. Is just ranching and all the stuff that goes with
that's cool.
I grew up cattle farming. I grew up on a beef farm.
Yeah, we really have to talk. Okay.
I can't wait.
I'm so glad we met. Okay.
Yeah, and you're going to have to get down to Uruguay then to
yes, I really, there's so many places I want to go.
Wow.
Yeah, this is kind of a book that I want to write, but I figured I should just start with the article so that I'm not sitting on it for incubating for years.
So excited. Well, thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you.
This was so much fun. We could go on for hours.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. We will catch you listeners next time on Life List and catch all of you in the field.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.